Hi, I am Becky Meagher, and welcome to Transitions, Body, Mind, Spirit. Transitions. We have so many different transitions in our life, and I like to use the metaphor of triathlons. That's what I do. I'm still doing it. In triathlons, the first thing you do is swim, and then you get in a transition area, you change things, and then you get on your bike and bicycle, and then you do a transition, and then you run or walk or somehow motivate yourself to get to the next part. So that's what life is about. We all think we're going to start in one thing, and life changes, and we end up doing something we never thought we would. And today we have an amazing guest. Amazing. Have you ever thought that maybe somebody might have said, well, we can't do anything more for your illness, and that's it, and it looks like a quick ending? Well, what about if you fight that and say, no, I'm not going to believe that? What if somebody said, you can't have children? And you say, no, I'm not going to believe that. So we have an amazing health coach here. She's going to tell you about her life. And we also have a second show that will tell more about how she helps so many people from sickness to health. And I want to welcome Virginia Harper. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you. This is great. Mm-hmm. So how would you describe in a couple sentences what you do, and then we're going to start from where you were born and go through the whole bio to see how the transitions in your life have changed you.
Well, the best description is I'm a health coach, but I'm very focused on using food as therapy.
Food as therapy?
Yes, food as therapy to help people get over autoimmune conditions. So I concentrate on macrobiotics, food energetics. And macrobiotic, the word means full life. Mm. And food energetics means the way the food comes together to be metabolized in your system. So it goes a little bit beyond nutrition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. And briefly, we're going to start with where you were born, and you were born in Chile.
Yes.
Yes. And tell us about how you made the transition. You're a young girl in Chile, and you said that every day you'd get fresh food from the market. Your parents would, right?
Right. It was a different life, of course. And in Chile, at that time especially, I was around 8 years old or so when I came to the States. So my first 7 years was about the life there. And it was very much living close to nature, if you will, because we would go every day and get our food from the market, so it was fresh. We didn't have big refrigerators. We didn't freeze a lot. And so our eating in general was more fresh.
Yes, yes. And then somehow or other your parents moved you to the United States.
Yes, yes.
And you were how old when you moved?
7 or 8, yeah.
Okay, 7 or 8 years old. So, and you ended up in Connecticut?
Yes, we ended up in Connecticut because my father has sisters living there. And he liked the idea of bringing his family here and started a fresh life and more opportunities and things like that. And so we settled in Connecticut. So overnight I went from a very traditional, natural living type kind of life to a lot of buildings and traffic,
wow.
grocery stores and canned food and box foods that we just didn't know. And so the first transition was getting here. The second was my body going through now digesting different kind of quality of foods.
And so though your parents might have said, great, we can just open a can and not have to go to the market every day, it took its toll on your health. So tell us about your health as an adolescent, as a teenager. And there were two prongs of health problems.
Yes. I began having symptoms at a young age, 12, 13, just a lot of pains and aches, mostly my digestive. I was very constipated as a child, but the doctor could tell my parents, well, this is the way she is. And then I was in gymnastics, and they said, well, the pains on the hips and all that's coming from her doing gymnastics. And there was always that kind of excuse or reason to tie it to. Now that I've learned what I've learned, I look back at the patterns of eating, and stress has a big part in all this, how my body manifested into 2 incurable autoimmune conditions I ended up with.
Wow. And those 2 incurable, quote, were what?
One is a blood condition called Takayasu arteritis, which is affects your arteries, your main arteries. And it has to do with circulation and has to do with what the quality the arteries are. I get weakened by the blood flow. And then the second one was Crohn's disease, which is an inflammatory bowel condition that you just get worse, and eventually you stop really digesting the food efficiently.
Wow. And that, I hear that's very painful.
Yeah.
So stomach pains, and you probably didn't have any energy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as a young person, it was traumatic anyway to be diagnosed. It took them 7 years to even come to any kind of diagnosis.
Wow.
And in between there, I ended up having a stroke when I was 19.
A stroke when you're 19 years old, that's unheard of.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they couldn't tell me why, and they couldn't tell me how it was going to be treated, and the Takayasu itself moves throughout the carotid arteries into your aorta, and eventually kills you before you're 30 if you're a young person getting it at that age.
Whoa.
So they had already given me a time limit on my life.
Wow. And you're 19 years old?
Yeah, I'm 20 years old at this time, you know.
And they say, well, you maybe have 10 years to live.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And they said, there's nothing we can do?
No, the best we can do, they said, is keep you on anti-inflammatory drugs, keep comfortable, keep the symptoms low, and have you on blood thinners to prevent stroke. You know, all the medicines they had were symptom related. Nobody could really tell me why my body was doing this,
Right.
what caused it. You know, maybe we can find an answer to turn it around, but there were no answers as far as the medical was concerned.
Oh. So here you are just trying to go with the medical community, and you're going, well, this isn't working. And somehow or other you started your own exploration, right?
Yeah, so, you know, it's always about looking at what's happening in your life in that moment. And so after I got over why me, I got proactive and said, okay, there's got to be other ways around this. I don't know how, but I remembered in Chile, my grandmother would go to the kitchen in the yard to get her remedies. We didn't run to doctors every time something hurt.
Wow.
And so I started reaching out to my family and saying, you know, there's got to be something, help me figure it out. And in that process, my aunts were very much into vitamins and supplements, so I started some of those, and those helped me up to a certain point because I was so depleted with Crohn's, you don't digest and absorb. So I was malnourished and had a hard time my body sustaining nutrition. It was my dad actually who came across the macrobiotic concept in the New York area. And he very excitedly called me and said, hey, I have this for you to try. And at that point, you know, everything is divine, divine timing. I had been scheduled for the first colon surgery because that's all the medical could offer me. The drugs aren't working anymore. We need to start cutting on your colon. And I knew eventually the whole colon was going to have to come out.
Oh, and if you don't have a colon, then you have to have like a bag thing?
Yes, there's other procedures that they do now, but back then it was a bag.
Wow.
And I knew that that was not for me.
Right.
I just knew inside of me that's not for me. You I have to avoid it. So when my dad called and said, here's a concept that has to do with food and changing the lifestyle so you deal with what's going in your body as well as how your body's handling life, stress-wise. I said, I'm going to try it. What do I have to lose,
Right.
And it was a no-brainer at that moment. It kind of makes sense that food and my digestion. And it was an incredible experience talking to that counselor.
In New York.
In New York,
Yeah.
because he never looked at, he looked at the x-ray just to see what's going on, but then the other concentration, the rest of the consult was about my lifestyle. The way I thought, was I a happy person, was I a positive person, what I ate, how I slept. And no other doctor had asked me that.
Wow, he was holistic before.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a thing.
Yes.
Yes.
And so then he told me, okay, I'm going to put some food groups together, and I want you to start this right now if you want to try to avoid the surgery. We need to get your intestines working properly.
Right.
In 7 years, from Mass General Hospital in Boston to Vanderbilt in Nashville, up and down the coast, I had doctors telling me, this is not curable. You got dealt a bad hand. Sorry, all we have for you is these drugs with all these side effects.
Wow.
So for somebody to tell me that they're going to change my food and I should start seeing some improvement, it was hard to believe because why hadn't I been told this before?
Right, right.
But it was enough for me to go on and say, okay, let me give it a try because right now I'm not digesting anything.
And you're in pain, you're miserable.
Oh yeah, if anybody knows anything about inflammatory bowel disease and Crohn's, you never leave the house because you're constantly in the bathroom and it could be painful, bloody diarrhea. It's just good, it gets ugly.
Yeah, wow. And by this time you were married?
I had just gotten married,
And also went to UT, got a degree?
Yeah, right. I was a George Peabody by then. I was back in Nashville, and got married, and that's why I moved to Nashville. Actually, my husband was from here, and during that time is when my dad told me about the macrobiotics and all that. So I began, and to my surprise, I began to see subtle differences within the first 3 days.
3 days?
Yes.
After 7 years
Yes.
of steroids probably? And all
Yes.
this,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I say subtle because my food had to be baby food because my digestion had gotten that bad that I couldn't eat bulky, fibrous foods. And so my counselor started me on whole foods, but the quality was great, but I had to make it into baby food for myself to retrain my intestines to digest properly.
So that would be putting it in a
Yeah, I had
Really?
to put it through a food meal,
food
a
meal.
baby food meal. Everything I cooked, my vegetables. Now, I want to point out that all these doctors I saw from Boston to Vanderbilt told me, do not eat bulk, do not eat fiber, because that's going to trigger inflammation. So then I have a counselor sitting in front of me saying, your intestines function on bulk and fiber.
Total opposite.
It was very scary for me because I didn't want to end up back in the hospital.
Ooh.
But it was the way, this is why I teach food energetics, because it's the way you put the foods together, the way you cook them, the way you prepare them, and the way you eat them that makes a difference how your body's going to accept it.
And you found this from your own experience, and then bit by bit people could see that you're
Yes.
getting better.
Yes.
And they came to you and say, wow, I see you're getting better. What are you doing? Can you
Exactly.
teach me?
Exactly.
Right?
And so it was very humbling to have people knocking on my door saying, can you help my sister, my mother, my father, themselves. And all I knew to teach was what I did. And it took me a year to turn everything around back to normal, where my conditions were not detectable anymore.
Wow. That's amazing.
And in that year, I improved. And the doctors would say, well, we can't put that this is cured or healed because these things don't heal. And so time was my proof. Time was my proof. I did go ahead and have a colonoscopy done in 2002 because I was writing a book at the time, and I knew people would ask me, how do you know your Crohn's is gone? Because in every medical book you read, you can't get rid of it.
It's incurable, they say.
Yes.
Yes.
And so my colonoscopy showed up clean, like I've never even had. In fact, the doctor I went to said to me, you must have been misdiagnosed because there's nothing here.
7 years.
For 7 years of suffering, yes. I said, I was not misdiagnosed.
You cured your body. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, our body's made to repair. Our body's always changing cells. And we change every cell in the body every 7 years. And so once you learn your health code on how your body functions at a macrobiotic level, which is balance, then all you do is keep doing that on a consistent basis, and you slow down aging, you slow down any disease that may be trying to take over, because we all have that probability of something, breaking down.
Right.
I mean, we're human beings. But we have so much control of how to feel each day. And once you learn what that is for you, you live within those parameters.
Well, give us a little idea, and the next show we'll do the lots of detail, but macrobiotic is what?
Macrobiotics is living within your environment to balance your condition.
Okay, and?
And so what that means is that it's always about balancing what your conditions do in that day, okay? So if the weather changes, your food should change because your body needs different fuel. It needs to heat up, it needs to cool down, okay? Just to keep it simple, winter and summer. And so macrobiotics is about living within your natural state of being, your surroundings. What grows there is what's gonna be best support for your body. And so whole foods means foods that are in their whole form and not tampered with are the best support and signal for the body to take in and know what to do with.
Okay.
The body doesn't recognize Coca-Cola. There's too many components in there to decipher what's nutrition. There's no nutrition, right? And so there's certain foods that the body doesn't know what to do with because it's been so processed. It's been so adulterated that the body does. So what does it do? It stores it for later breakdown. Or it builds up acids, extra acids, in order to break down what it doesn't recognize. And it's a very natural process the body does, and when it's on autopilot, then we feel the symptoms. And now those conditions are under autoimmune conditions because they're man-made, they're environmental. We created those conditions by our lifestyles.
So if somebody goes, yeah, it sounds good, you have, and we'll show a picture of it later, you have a book out?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then there's another one or two or three coming out also that kind of outlines how can you change your food groups.
Yes.
But also on your website it said things like you have seminars.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so I was interested in your introduction when you said about transitions, that sometimes we don't always go the way we think our life is going to go.
Right.
Because once I got well and I saw that I had a second chance of life, I jumped back into my life, and I had 2 children.
2 children. They said you never could have kids.
Yeah, because my body would have been able to tolerate it if I lived that long to have kids.
Oh,
and
wow.
so I had 2 children who are grown and married and with their own family. And at the time I was going to go back to my career, which is special education teacher working with autism.
Wow.
But God had other plans. As I got better and more people knocked on my door, it was like, wow, I felt this great sense of responsibility to learn what this was about. How the food have so much power that it changes our cellular makeup. Now we have so much scientific proof of that, but 35 years ago,
Wow.
it was still kind of a mystery, even to me. How does this food do this, you know?
Yes.
And so I changed my direction, and I opened up to the fact that my life was spared, and I need to pass this information on. So I went and studied and became a macrobiotic food and energetic counselor, and started slowly, you know, just counseling people that were interested. And it became really essential for me to realize that people needed education. You can't just give somebody a to-do list.
Right.
Without
Change all the way you, throw everything out you've been eating and now change your ways.
Right.
Yeah.
The why, you need 2 motivators. You need the motivator of why you're going to do it. In my case, it was to save my life and hopefully have a life,
That's
right?
a big thing.
My second motivator became, how does this work? Why did it work?
Yeah.
And so that's what my whole program now is about. And it's the name of what I do, the name of my business doing this is You Can Heal You 1 meal at a time. Because that's all you can do is 1 meal at a time.
It's like the 12-step, 1 day at a time
Yes,
thing.
exactly.
1 meal at a time.
Yeah, you can't go any faster. You can't go any faster. And once you learn what that meal needs to be for you, that's your life-given force right there, once you figure it out. And so education is what really backs up everything I do. Whether I do monthly cooking classes, I do retreats, I do everything I do bases around education, you learning why. To this day, I'm still learning why, so it never ends. But it's wonderful to see how you begin to gather tools, and it empowers you. Because now, if something shows up, it doesn't scare me. I just stand back and say, okay, what is going on here? And you deal with it at a different level altogether. I still go to doctors to get checked and give me information.
Okay.
And then I bring home that information and I decide how to handle it. You get to know your body in such a different way, so you learn body signals. Your symptoms are really your friend.
That's one way to look at
yes,
it. Wow.
it's the body talking to you. So you have to figure out what to say.
Yes. So give me a little thumbnail idea of the curative. I mean, not everybody has Crohn's, but I
Right.
know people have been to you for cancer and diabetes,
yeah,
and
yeah.
you know, who would want to come to you?
Yeah, anybody that's not happy with the way they're feeling. And I do get more people now that just want to prevent, hey, this runs in my family, I want to avoid it, or I want to just be in a better place with my energy. Which is nice that people are that way. I wasn't that smart. I had to, get hit with a 2x4 before I started paying attention to my body. But it's about taking care of inflammation in your body. That's really the bottom line. When you look at all the conditions you just mentioned, they always start off with inflammation that becomes systemic. We have inflammation all the time because that's our protective tool that the body uses. But it should not stay. And when inflammation stays, it breaks down tissue, it breaks down blood quality, it starts damaging around it.
Right.
It's like a cut on the finger. You never have to worry about it, you know, doing its thing. It's going to close up, it's going to heal. The same thing should be with the rest of our body, but inflammation comes there to protect, but it shouldn't stay there.
Right, get rid of it.
Yeah, so it comes and goes throughout the day, and anything we do. When that inflammation becomes a problem and it creates a disease, you know, that's the bottom line to all this, is eating foods that are neutralizing pH and sugar in your body so you keep inflammation down so the body can do the work it's meant to do.
Right, and have you had, like, for instance, with diabetes, have you had people that cured their diabetes?
Well, yeah, I mean, especially if you get diabetes at an older age, it's easier to turn around. When I get children or infants that are born with diabetes, you know, then it's a little harder because it's the pancreas is more involved. As you get older, there's more liver that's involved with diabetes. And so it is about changing how your body is metabolizing your food. And I did a retreat one time, a women's retreat. It was over a weekend, and the space I used was this family who had a farm. And she had diabetes, and she wanted to participate in the program. I said, of course, you know, we're using your space, you can participate. I said, the only thing I ask is that you eat everything that we have here. Because that is the diabetic, they have low sugar, so they have to grab a candy bar, all these things they have to do.
Right, so we don't have just a minute left.
So
what happened?
she improved in those 3 days. She was able to cut back her insulin, and she was shocked because she was like 4 or 5 medicines.
Wow.
So that's how quickly. That's why I saw my differences in 3 days.
Wow, that's amazing. There is so much more to this, and I know that people can get on your website or actually have individual consults with you, which is pretty amazing. And the second show that we're going to do, we're going to dig down more into some of like, I want to know what foods and what is it, and more details about this.
Okay.
And I think it's an amazing story that more people need to know and more doctors need to know.
Yeah.
It's like, who's out there in the medical community seeing this? And why aren't they doing more of this? And I believe we have to find integrative medicine. But I'll get off my soapbox. And I would like to say that thank you very much, Virginia.
My pleasure.
For being with us. And stay tuned for the next show. And Transitions, I'm Becky Meagher. Thank you. All right. Whew. That was good. That was wonderful. Whew. That
Okay.
was,
Good.